He was huddled in the corner of the sidewalk, knees scraped, eyes brimming with tears. A boy far too small for so much pain, yet big enough not to cry out loud. The city rushed past him as if he didn't exist. Cars, footsteps, voices, everything moved except him, and it was there, between the gray of concrete and the silence of abandonment, that she stopped. Not because she knew what to do, but because she felt an old echo there. An echo that wasn't his, but had once been hers. She crouched slowly, as if afraid her very movement might startle him. Her hands, dirty, calloused, reached out with a gentleness only someone who has lost everything could offer. She said nothing. She simply touched the boy's untied shoelace. And in that touch lived more comfort than 1,000 words. Because when you live on the street, silence is often the only language possible. And she spoke it fluently. The asphalt was hot, almost unbearable, yet they seemed to occupy another time, a suspended time, a time in which two abysses gazed at each other and, for an instant, recognized they sprang from the same pain. He, small, with a fragile body and a heart already full of absences. She, invisible, shoulders bowed from carrying stories no one wanted to hear. And even so, there in that moment, something sacred existed, as if the boy's fall weren't chance, but a calling to stitch together destiny's life had torn apart, a calling to remember that caring doesn't require a fixed address, that affection doesn't ask the size of a bank account. She tied the shoelace with the same attention given to tending a wound. There was no hurry, no explanations, only that gesture, small, silent, whole. And in that gesture, she mended herself a little, one thread at a time. Meanwhile, across the street, eyes hidden behind dark glass watched. A man in a luxury car, used to buying solutions, didn't know what to do with a scene that pierced him inside. He didn't get out, didn't intervene. But something in him yielded, as if an ancient foundation began to crack. Because there are hurts you only understand when you see them from the outside, but feel them on the inside. That day, no one took photos. No one applauded. No one knew. Yet in that small meeting between misery and abandonment, a spark was born. And every light starts that way. Unlikely, silent, discreet. It was there, between the scraped knee and the tight knot of a shoelace. That transformation began, not just for him, but for her, and for the one who, even unwillingly, watched. For sometimes life sets up encounters that make no sense at first glance, but have the power to stitch souls and, little by little, illuminate the shadows. The sun was almost cruel that day, fiery, merciless. It burned skin as if to remind that the world outside doesn't offer shade to everyone. She felt the heat slide down her back, gluing thin fabric to her slender frame as she walked between cracked sidewalks and glances that never lingered more than a second. Yet there was something in that sweat, in that weight of heat, that reminded her of what she carried, not in her arms, in her soul, a burden unseen, but aching every day, sitting in a nearly invisible corner of the square. She stretched her feet out of the shade, as if she needed to feel the world touching her skin to remember she was still there, beside her. The boy from before leaned his head on his knee, eyes still red yet now quiet. He said nothing, nor did she. Sometimes silence nourishes more than 1,000 poorly spoken promises. Her body, so used to the street's roughness, seemed to soften there, next to that small stranger. Something in him asked for care, not pity, a vulnerability that didn't beg, only existed. She ran her fingers through the boy's tangled hair, without thinking. A simple gesture, almost unintentional, yet overflowing with presence. In that instant the air shifted. For there is a way of touching that isn't touch. It's listening. Silent listening to another's body. She didn't know his name, where he'd come from, but she knew he was wounded in places nobody could see. And she, unwittingly, began to heal a bit of that, simply by not trying to fix anything. Meanwhile, on the other side of the square, the city remained indifferent. Cars honked. People talked loudly on cell phones. Commerce buzzed as always. But between them lay a small field of silence, an oasis of presence amid the desert of haste. And there, on that hot sidewalk, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in a long time. Care. not care received, care given. Because paradoxically, sometimes caring for another is how we find our own center. It was there she realized. Compassion chooses no address, no last name. It recognizes no titles, no bank limits. It simply exists. And when it shows up, there's no going back to what you were. For a true act of care, even if born on a sidewalk, is a seed of humanity. And every seed, someday, sprouts. Even if nobody is watching. Even if the ground is hard. Even if everything says it won't. The door screeched as it opened, a sound out of place in the hush. It was a large house, full of furniture seemingly chosen by someone who knows rules but not memories. Everything gleamed. Everything sat in the right spot, except the owner. He, the man behind the car's dark windows, now watched in silence as the woman entered, hesitant, the boy by the hand. No words were spoken, because something stronger than speech filled the moment, the discomfort of colliding worlds. She stopped in the hall, like someone stepping onto territory that isn't hers. Dirty feet on marble floors looked like a silent scream. The boy, knee still scraped, squeezed her hand with a force that sought not rescue but continuity. He didn't want to be there alone. And she, though she didn't fully understand, knew she had to stay, at least for now. The man observed from afar. Hard eyes contained expression, but inside, something trembled, a fear felt only by those who built walls too high, the fear of needing to tear them down. In the kitchen, the smell of toasted bread drifted like an unbidden memory, a simple aroma, yet loaded with meaning. She inhaled deeply and for a moment closed her eyes. She recalled some long-ago morning when her mother still lived, and Sundays began with that same scent. Memory isn't chosen. It invades, takes over, burns, then quiets. The boy looked around with hungry eyes, not just for food, but for belonging. They sat at the table, large enough to dwarf 3 people in that instant. The man, used to dinners where silverware enforces invisible rules, saw the scene with estrangement. It was like watching a film in a foreign language. The woman picked up a plastic cup, offered it to the boy, and only then served herself. Every move of hers defied etiquette, yet reaffirmed an essence he had forgotten, serving out of love, not obligation. It wasn't easy. Silence weighed there, distrust in every glance, fear in each restrained gesture. But in that artificially perfect space, something true began to sprout, an implicit pact, not a friendship, not a gratitude, but a mutual care between 2 strangers who, for very different reasons, had learned not to trust, and now together began to unlearn. The house, for all its comforts, couldn't hide the man's loneliness. His eyes fixed on nothing, his automatic gestures, his emotional rigidity, signs of someone who confused success with safety. Yet there, before that barefoot woman and wounded boy, he was slowly pushed into a realm he'd avoided for years. Feeling. And for someone who has spent life controlling everything, feeling is almost unbearable. Even so, he didn't leave the room. He remained, motionless yet present. And in that non-gesture, there was a beginning, because affection sometimes doesn't enter through spoken words. It slips through the cracks of living together, through pauses, through unease, through simply not turning away. And in that echoing house, for the first time, someone listened without needing to speak. Dinner arrived as a silent test. Table set with silver, plates aligned, crystal glasses. Everything too perfect, as if the house needed constant affirmation of its superiority. Yet perfection was discomfort that night. The woman sat with restrained delicacy, like one entering a temple where she feels unworthy. The boy, still shy, sought her eyes at each gesture, as if she were his compass in the unfamiliar territory. Vivian appeared with an elegant gait and sharp gaze. Assistant, housekeeper, filtered between the owner and the real world. Her smile was polite but cold, porcelain, beautiful outside, fragile inside. She scanned the woman up and down, not with curiosity but judgment. Silent judgment disguised as courtesy. The kind of look that weighs heavier than words, stating you don't belong without moving lips. At the table's head, the man sliced filet into exact pieces, a habit from countless business dinners. But the meat seemed harder to chew that night, because more than food circulated. Awkwardness, discomfort, the clash of worlds forced to coexist. The woman, hands resting in her lap, looked around, trying not to lose herself, yet something in her remained unbowed, a dignity that doesn't bend even under disdain. Vivian offered wine. The woman declined, offered a cloth napkin. She thanked her, but didn't use it. Instead, she wet her lips with water and smiled at the boy, who now ate with the calm of someone starting to feel safe. He stitched that scene together, unknowingly. His gaze created a bridge between etiquette and affection, between what is imposed and what is lived. And on that bridge, the woman walked carefully, yet without losing herself. In the corridor, a floral dress hung in plain view. Simple, light fabric, sewn by her years ago. She brought in a worn bag, unsure she'd ever wear it again. Now it hung where all could see, an inadvertent reminder of who she was before the fall, also a symbol of resistance. For some armor shine yet imprisoned, while some dresses, though frayed, set you free. After dinner, she rose and went to the sink. She didn't wait to be asked. She began washing dishes with slow, meticulous movements. Vivian tried to stop her, but the man gestured, let her, and in that gesture, he allowed something to happen. Because washing dishes that night wasn't chores. It was affirmation, purification, a way to touch the untouchable. And as the water ran, she washed more than plates. She washed old wounds, the feeling of not belonging. The house, once built only of silence and distance, began learning a new language, a language spoken not with words, but with presences. And that night, the sound of water hitting dishes was truer than any toast made with crystal. For when pain finds space to exist, even the most expensive glass falls silent. The rain fell like an announcement, not of an end, but of a restart. She walked the city with firm, wet steps, floral dress now clinging like a second skin. Beside her, the boy held her hand with the quiet trust of someone no longer afraid of getting lost. They returned to the awnings not as fugitives, but as ones revisiting familiar soil to truly understand the source of their strength. They needed to tread there again, not as victims, but as lucid survivors. Every corner of the sidewalk told a story only those who sleep beneath it can decipher. That night, she read those codes with the eyes of her soul. Pieces of cardboard were no longer shelter, but relics of a life that no longer defined them. It still hurt, still wounded, but no longer imprisoned. There was raw dignity in reconnecting with the asphalt, as if by touching the ground they reaffirmed their story doesn't start where others said it ended. She met familiar faces, people the world forgot, but she never erased. A wave here, a piece of bread there. Small gestures that, in the heart of the street, hold jewel-like value. And in one such encounter she heard words that mark her. You came back different, but no less ours. Sometimes you must leave to return whole. She came back not to stay, but to honor the path. The boy watched everything with wide, alert eyes. The street that once threatened now revealed itself as teacher, a harsh yet honest instructor that teaches without promising reward, that charges but also reveals. He learned not only the hardness of life, but the beauty of those who resist without losing their gaze. He learned failure isn't an end. It's ground, a kind of soil that, if well dug, yields wisdom. She knew she couldn't protect him from everything, but she could show what's possible even with so little. That alone was shelter. At nights, and they sat under an awning. She offered the last cookie in the package. He shared it back without hesitation. Silence between them, eyes meeting. Then she said, "We're still going to leave this place. But for now, this is where we learn who we are." In that simple sentence lived a world. It wasn't just about leaving the street. It was about shedding the condition of mere survival, reclaiming the right to dream, and teaching that even the toughest ground can be a starting point if you look at it with courage, if you listen to what it has to say. And the asphalt, that night, taught more than any book ever could. She held the cell phone firmly, as if carrying an old secret whose time had come to surface. The device lay hidden among clothes and fear, a silent weapon against a story nobody dared tell. Just an ordinary object, cold, common. But now it carried the spark of something bigger. Justice, Not vengeance justice, but the justice of truth spoken with courage. The boy slept on the sofa, breathing light, small body wrapped in a borrowed blanket. She knew the time was now. She walked through the house in silence, each step confronting old ghosts. The large living room, the hanging paintings, luxurious furniture, all contrasted with the tension within her. Naming what was always denied isn't easy. Saying this happened to me when the world taught you to hush isn't easy. Across the room, Vivian watched silently. First time without superiority. Something different glimmered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. The assistant, always so firm, now seemed less beside the strength of a woman refusing silence. When the woman showed the video, short, sharp, irrefutable, nobody needed words. The image spoke for itself. And in that instant, something broke that had long seemed unbreakable. The wall of denial. The man didn't shout, didn't deny. He simply lowered his eyes, as if finally seeing what he'd never wanted to. He was a father, the millionaire, the center of that house, but also the missing link explaining the boy's absences, voids, silences. She wasn't seeking confrontation. She sought clarity. Clarity hurts, but it frees. Hidden truths don't disappear. They grow and one day demand space. At that moment, the word proof stopped being a burden and became a rung, a step higher on the ladder back to dignity. She didn't want punishment. She wanted freedom. To look at herself and say, I did what had to be done. And she did, with calm courage, no yelling, simply by being who she had always been, now with the voice she once lacked. Vivian, in an unexpected gesture, took her hand. They didn't speak. Yet there, two women of such different stories recognize each other, not through pain, but through the strength born of it. And in silence, shame returned to its rightful owner. Not the woman, not the boy, but he who thought expensive rugs could hide truth. That night, there was no celebration, no announcement, but there was victory, the most intimate, hardest kind, standing tall before the truth. There, in the belly of the lie that had ruled that place, something new sprouted. A raw truth, yes, but sometimes that's all you need to begin again. He watched her from the top of the stairs, face hidden in a half-light, as if unsure which role to play. Father, provider, authority. But when truths became non-negotiable, all roles tore away. Only the man remained, stripped of arguments, naked of reason, with a void once filled by power now exposing fear of losing the last fragile bond. She walked through the house lighter, owing no explanations. The boy held her hand firmly. Something new connected them. Safety born when someone chooses themselves, even if it means leaving everything familiar behind. The man tried to speak, voice failing. Some words can't be said casually, others need no speaking. He tried to approach the boy, hand extended in a rehearsed gesture. The child recoiled, not out of anger, but instinct. The wound was fresh, and no shallow gesture could heal it. The woman stepped between them, not as barrier, but boundary. She knew the boy needed time. The man needed silence. You can't mend what's broken by imposing forgiveness. Forgiveness conjugates only from inside out. In that room where so many speeches have been made, she chose silence. Firm silence, without hate, without revenge. A silence saying, I go on, even if you don't come. Peace sometimes demands exile. Not imposed exile, but voluntary. Chosen when what's at stake isn't place, but a soul. She chose the soul, chose to leave not as one who flees, but as one who respects herself. Before leaving, she looked once more at the man, standing, holding not a glass but his own face, seeing himself perhaps for the first time not by what he has, but by what he failed to be. She no longer felt fear or resentment, only a piercing clarity. Sometimes breaking is the only way to repair. And so, without speeches, promises, or audience, she turned her back, not from weakness, but strength. Some pains don't heal by staying, and some loves bloom only when you leave. The boy looked back one last time, but didn't ask to stay. He learned from her that leaving can also be an act of love, that some families are born of blood, others of the courage to protect what's essential. In that farewell without a hug, there was more truth than in all the bonds money ever tried to forge. The room was small, yet it held something sacred. Walls once peeling now breathed color, a soft blue like sky after the storm. She painted carefully, steady hands, focused eyes, as if each brushstroke also stitched her own cracks. The boy watched sitting on the floor, holding a little roller, smiling in silence, not the wide grin of someone who gained something, but the discreet smile of someone who, for the first time, builds something together. No luxury, no full comfort, but a clean floor, a simple bed, a wardrobe with space for clothes yet to come. The shelter center wasn't a final home, but in that moment it was a womb, a birthplace of new beginnings. There, far from threats and masks, they could breathe, sleep in peace, dream without fear of waking to find everything shattered. She pored over books at night, borrowed books, study manuals, used notebooks, learning like one who prays, believing each turned page opens a door. Studying wasn't duty. It was a promise, the silent promise that tomorrow could be more dignified than yesterday. While she read, the boy rested his head on her shoulder, eyes closing, lulled not by fairy tales but by true presence. On the wall hung a new photograph, the two of them side by side in front of the shelter building, late afternoon light casting soft contours on their faces. Not a conventionally pretty photo, but proof that memories can be born after pain, that dignity once regained becomes visible even in the simplest details. In that image glimmered the symbol of a new narrative being written, one that doesn't begin with abandonment but with choice. She surveyed the room at days and with gratitude that needs no permission, gratitude without guilt, gratitude of someone who knows she owes no one for having survived, that receiving help isn't weakness but shared strength, that rebuilding isn't starting from zero. It's beginning from a deeper point where pain has been traversed and turned to foundation. And so, between newly painted walls and dreams under renovation, they slept, bodies light, spirits at peace. Sometimes all someone needs to be reborn is a blue room where they can finally rest. The visit started spaced far apart, at first edged with awkwardness, like someone unsure how to behave around simplicity. Over time, they became frequent, gentle, natural. He arrived unannounced, carrying a bag of bread and lower eyes. He didn't speak much. He'd sit with the boy in the yard, shoot the breeze, offer small silences while learning, slowly, to listen. She observed from a distance, not interfering. She knew the bond forming was different from any before. It wasn't a father and son reunion. It was the start of something subtler, companionship, a tie neither forced nor demanded, a tie cemented only by steady, unremarkable presence. In that quiet constancy, he began to learn what had never been taught, to be fully there even when unsure what to say. The boy received a stuffed dog, simple, already a bit worn, that instantly became guardian of the nights. He named it Belinia, and each night slept with it against his chest. A childlike gesture, yes, but laden with meaning, for that small object, pedigree-less, store-valueless, represented something he'd never felt so clearly, affection that seeks no proof, love that requires no performance, only presence. With time, she allowed the two to go out together. They walked the square, sat on the grass, shared simple snacks. No promises or grand gestures, just sharing twilight, fatigue, silence, a sliver of peace. Sometimes love is at a park bench in two pairs of bare feet that owe explanations to no one. She, for her part, didn't romanticize. She knew how much trusting hurt. Still, she chose to stay, not from dependence, but decision. For someone always expelled, from home, from table, from story, choosing to remain is radical. And she remained, steady, alert, at peace with her own rhythm, letting love grow not like a storm but like light slowly flooding a dark room, without noise, haste, or demand. In that home built of invisible bricks, love stopped being ideal and became everyday. Not movie love, real love, love that brews coffee, fetches a child from school, understands when silence is needed, love that seeks no applause or reward, simply continues, one step per day, one silence at a time, one gesture after another, like someone finally learning to stay. The nausea crept in quietly, as if not to scare. At first she thought of fatigue or spoiled food, but days repeated and her body spoke louder. She looked at the test with mixed surprise and hush. Those two faint lines, almost fragile, held a scream only she heard. It wasn't fear of the new. It was a weight of believing once more that life can trust her. She sat on the bed's edge, room still smelling of paint, bare feet touching the cool floor. Deep breath, no celebration, no tears, only inner space slowly rearranging, a new center forming. He entered softly, boy beside him, cookie packet in hand. They sat together as if already knowing something had changed. They asked nothing, offering what they had, company, and at that moment it was more than enough. She smiled and took a cookie, bit it slowly, tasting childhood, simplicity, the essential. Balacha, she murmured. The boy repeated the word, laughing. The name stuck. Unintentionally, they christened the moment. It was the name of the first shared dream of a new family. It didn't matter if temporary, if uncertainties lingered. There was affection, presence, faith, and that was enough for hope to sprout where survival once stood. He sat beside her without speaking, simply laid his hand lightly over hers. First time not to beg forgiveness or promise anything, but to say with his body, I'm here. That simple touch carried the weight of a world trying to be reborn. They looked at one another unhurried, and without naming a thing, understood they were ready. Not for an ideal future, but for a possible present built from what still beats. Pregnancy didn't come to fill a void. It came as life's silent reply. You survive, and now you may bloom, even without guarantees, with fear, with the past still whispering. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is allowing something new to be born while still bearing old scars. In that blue room, in a life under reconstruction, the seed of continuity was sown. With gentleness, humility, love. She walked the street with calm steps, eyes set on the horizon where the day dawned. No longer the woman who slept under awnings or bowed under judgment. She was another, whole, wounded, yes, but with wounds healed by the courage of crossing each one. Beside her, the boy held her hand, and in the other carried a small bag of bread, as though it symbolized everything they built, little yet enough, simple yet true. The father now visited regularly, without imposition or titles, only presence, and gradually rebuilt bonds not out of duty, but choice. He chose to listen, to stay, to be, not to erase what was, but to help sustain what would be, and that itself was repair, not the kind achieved with speeches, but with time, small gestures, steady silence. She learned to receive, perhaps the hardest step, to receive without guilt or fear of owing, to receive because she now knew she deserved. It wasn't charity or favor. It was bond, belonging, understanding that gratitude isn't submission, but recognition, and that recognition returned her value without intermediaries or masks. Her roots no longer clung to the asphalt where everything began. They grew inward, deep and outward, seeking new skies, not to flee the past, but to remember it as soil, not sentence, and every step, even the unsure ones, paves a truer path. In the window of the blue room hung a new curtain, light, translucent, dancing in the morning breeze. There, in that ordinary corner of any city, something extraordinary germinated, not for being grand, but real, a daily life where living ceased to be survival, where every gesture was a revolutionary act of continuity, where each breath was choice, and where night, for the first time in a long while, met tomorrow without fear, without haste, at peace. If the story touched something inside you, if, for an instant, you felt seen, subscribe to the channel. Here, every video is a mirror for the soul and a shelter for those fighting invisible battles, because you are not alone. And sometimes, everything starts with a simple click and a shared silence. Welcome